Welcome to this week's episode of Love Unravelled. Today we are discussing, I'm Holly.
I'm Isabel.
And it's
kind of around burnout and avoiding burnouts.
Yeah, how to avoid burnout, essentially.
Yeah.
Even though we're just 3 years old. But it definitely can happen.
Coming from a brand that's growing quickly with a small team.
Yeah.
Actually, we are the perfect target for burnout, but how we've managed it over the last 3 years.
Yeah.
Got some good points, some definite lessons learned. So when you first started Slow Love, it was very much just you. You knew you wanted to grow it and have a team of people.
Yes.
Did you kind of know what type of manager or business owner you would be before the team started? Or do you think working on your own for that period of time, you kind of already set the tone of your working environment?
I think it was a bit of both, because I had a really sort of set routine.
Mm-hmm.
So I would get up, I would go to the gym, because at that point I was so sort of fizzing with not anxiety, but I was obviously nervous that I had made this huge risk. So I had to, and then I feel when you have that much sort of nervous energy, it's almost like the productivity goes out the window. So I used exercise to feel like I harnessed it at the beginning of the day. And then I would take my dog on a walk. I would always listen to podcasts. So basically I read books. Somebody asked me this actually in a question and Q&A thing I did on my Holly von Bock Instagram about if I had any recommendations for things to listen to. So I listened to podcasts, the Grace Beverly one, which I talk about all the time. Some of the Diary of the CEO. I know some people don't like him. There's an aeroplane going past, sorry if you can hear it. And then I read a lot of books by Simon Sinek, again, a bit like Stephen Bartlett. He is like Marmite, but I really agreed with it's more about being a leader. And I think it was I basically knew exactly how I would want to lead the brand, because it isn't just managing a team of people in an office. That's not how I see it. I just see it very much in the larger sense. So it was I wanted to have an office atmosphere, and I knew how I wanted to do that. So then when you came along, for example, obviously I couldn't be at the gym till 9:30. When it was just me, obviously when Abby started, we'd have the set afternoon. So that was really easy to factor in. And then when it was just me, I would almost time block I would time block my day more efficiently than I do now, which is really ironic.
Well, you only had yourself to think about, really, so I can understand that.
I would have a list of stuff in my day-to-day ethos was basically to at the end of the day have a list of 5 things, which my dad, if he listens to this, which I don't think he does, but he told me that that's what he did. And basically those priority things on my list, I had to do that day, whatever. So if I decided to go out for lunch with someone, it didn't matter. I had to do those 5 things throughout the day, whatever. And I just felt it worked, getting my job, it just meant mentally, I felt like I was constantly pushing forwards. I was getting shit done, obviously not my VAT, which was when I knew I had to employ Isabel, because that was beyond my realm of expertise. But it just meant that then I was it doesn't really matter that I'm keeping to set hours. I am getting shit done. And if I'm a happier person by exercising, making time to network and things like that, which it's something that you should value. Joel is so good at that at Kindred. I just think there's before. And so I kind of set that in my head, mentally, how I wanted to lead the company was, I always knew that it was basically, we don't need to look like we're filling hours with our work, as long as the job gets done.
Point that actually your working day is determined by goals being tipped off rather than hours worked.
Yeah, what's the point?
Yeah.
To look like you're doing your job. I just think all of that plays into the wrong sort of mindset. And
not being busy fools. That's
Yeah.
what an old manager said to me, and it literally is always lives in my head.
Yeah, and that's why I personally I find it quite hard to work with people where it's like you want to be seen to be doing the most when actually it's like, well, are you doing the most, or have I done the same amount but I've just been concise and then finished my day earlier and then finished some stuff. It's just, and what, mentally, that must be quite draining because you're kind of trying to look like you're filling time. Filling time. So that was it, always very much. And like when you started, it was, we would get stuff done, but then it was always like, if it's a nice day, why don't we? And I used to say this to you all the time. It was like the sort of going out for a drink to sort of decompress or even chat about the day. We would still talk about work, but we did it, and it was like,
we might as well do this with a glass of wine in my hands. I'll never forget that. You'll be like, the sun's shining, we might as well like plan the rest of the week with a glass of wine in our hands rather than just sat on the desk. And at the beginning, I remember being like, is this a dream?
But I think obviously as a team gets bigger, you can't just everybody can't down tools. There has to be like different systems in place.
But the basics of that of that ethos remains. Like, not literally everyone can't down tools and go out for a drink, but it's very much like, let's take our foot off the gas if it's a kind of day where it's not, and
having meetings out. And if I was to bump into somebody, my poor dad's going to get such an ear bashing in this pod, but if for example, if I bumped into my dad in those early days, he'd be like, oh, are you not working today? And if I was going to meet somebody, whether it was like Emily, the graphic designer, her and I always meet at Sam and Jack's in the afternoon and like have a few drinks together. And actually, I've worked with her for like quite a few years now, and spending that time just like chewing the cud with her, her getting into exactly what my vision is with the logos or how I see things, just means that actually when she presents the design, it's always like bang on.
Yeah.
And I do think, and that's just because I don't know her, getting to, spending that time just chatting with somebody. And when my dad would say that to me, it was like, I don't see how this is any different from you going out for a lunch in London with your work colleague. Like, how is this any different?
But I'm just not in a suit and tie,
exactly,
bustling around.
Yeah. And it very much feels like that. And so when I'm going to jump ahead with this, but the childcare, it's just so much harder because still in this day and age, whether it's whoever makes more money in a couple, I feel like on the whole, and I am generalizing, but definitely within everybody who's worked with me, you are really good at drawing a line as to sort of actually you can do that because I'm at work. But I do think that the responsibility always falls on the mum.
Yeah.
And everybody who works here is so efficient and amazing at their job. And if that's the way it is, and if that's the way it still is in our working life and society, it'd be interesting to see how these two do deal with it. But the Abby and Ben,
Pringo will be stepping up.
You better be. But it's so hard when it's that mentality is just like the assumption is, and if things aren't going to change, I don't want to make life harder for people who work for me by me digging my heels in and saying, well, actually, this shouldn't be your responsibility. You should be staying here. It makes no difference to me.
Yeah.
I would much prefer that everybody just is happier and can finish off their work at home.
Yeah.
However it works.
I think that leads me on to the next point really nicely, is kind of setting, I think in those early days when it was just you and you had those like that time box day, you kind of really set the scene of how you wanted the Slow Love office in the future to be. And I think with an entrepreneurship and a small team, there's that element of there's no hiding. If someone's not doing their bit, it shows really quickly. And it's, we all talk really regularly now, and we have our weekly meeting and everything gets hashed out every week. And I mean, when I tell you it's black and white, as there is a to-do list which is written down in black and white for everyone to see, and we go through that to-do list in front of everybody.
Yeah.
So it's like, have you done this or haven't you done this? So when I'm saying there's no hiding, you've literally possibly got 6 days to hide from somebody because the next weekly meeting's coming up. But setting the expectation between that really flexible working environment versus what you expect as the output from your team works really well, because I think that your management style you filter it down really well, and you have that, you practice what you preach, basically. You've created an environment which ultimately works for you as the founder, and then everybody you've hired within your team, kind of the qualities that you have set for Slow Love is really beneficial for everybody else. I mean, I certainly haven't worked anywhere where the flexibility is just a given. And it's not, actually that's a lie, the last place I worked, and that's possibly why the fits for us worked really well, because I came from working for somebody who just let me get on with my role, and he was really amazing we actually had babies at the same time, pretty much. His wife had a baby like 2 days after me, so he was kind of living what I was going through at that time. So we understood that trying to work around a very young child is really tricky. So if you're going to be rigid, it's just basically setting everyone up for failure. So I'd come from an environment like that, which probably did really help. But having that there's a very clear expectation, I think, with the way Slow Love work. And I think having that flexibility ultimately does make people work more efficiently in their working day, because it's like, I've got these hours to do this because I'm allowed to go and be with my family at that time.
And I also, there's obviously times where Isabel, for instance, doesn't work on a Monday, but if I ever have any question about work, I'll ask you, and there's definitely not a sort of, I'm actually not working today. I mean, I won't can we have a 3-hour meeting on a day that you don't work, but I think it's just that sort of mutual understanding.
Yeah, for it to work, it's got to be like that, and because it's that chicken and egg thing, isn't it? If it was, I'm really sorry, I'm not working today, that workload or the inefficiencies would build up. So imagine if everybody in a team in an entrepreneurship environment was like, sorry, I'm not working today. If that question doesn't get answered in a small team, the knock-on effect is, that decision then possibly stops, or you have to go rogue, or something's not done right, and then actually the inefficiencies of that, I don't want to use the word stubbornness of your working day, but it's black and white as that could cause more problems than it's worth with a small team.
It'll be interesting to see as the team gets bigger how that's managed. I think and like you say, I think it's just really obvious if somebody, you're so proactive, if there isn't somebody and also there's just that clarity. I think where it's tricky is, I think, when people, like we said this before, we get a lot of people applying for sending their CVs in and things when we're not even hiring, which is a really flattering thing for us to have. But there's an element where people don't, I think if people want the opportunity, they kind of have blinkered hearing as to what you're offering them.
Yeah.
And so that sort of clarity of, like you say, it's really obvious. If somebody's job isn't getting done and you're having to take on someone's job, or with a new company, a new startup like we have been, there's very little room for me to hold someone's hand.
Yeah.
I just can't. I just can't do it. There's just been no way of that happening. So where we've taken on work experience or interns, actually the Evie, Abby and Shah basically were great, and sort of Shah had found out what her course units were and mapped out sort of stuff, and then Abby was giving her work, but really that was a lot for me to ask of them, because that was just taking time out of their day, and So it isn't something that we would always offer. But then having somebody that you're paying to come here to work and do their job, it's that I very much feel that we're too, like, as you say, an entrepreneurship, you can't, we don't have enough people to hold hand.
Yeah. I do think there is an element of hand holding, or there's just that very realistic
in the first
approach.
couple of weeks, getting to know how an office works or getting to relearn a system, that's one thing. But there's, having to feel that you're having to check up.
I think what you require of the team is you need your team members to have a confidence to get on.
Yeah.
Like, and mistakes are going to get made. You're very good at being like, mistakes are going to get made. That's just part and parcel of it. I'm not going to like come down. Obviously, if you keep making the same mistake, it's going to be a bit fucking annoying. But mistakes are going to get made, and as long as you kind of accept that that's going to happen, then everyone can move on and learn and whatnot. But there is definitely an element of where maybe stuff hasn't worked in the past, or is you need your team members to have a confidence that what they're good at, they're just going to get on with it.
Yeah.
And or get to a point where people are presenting you with like an option of solutions rather than giving you the problem and waiting for you to come up with a solution. That's kind of such
a really good example of that was the t-shirt drama in New York. So Shah only called me knowing that obviously we were in the middle of doing all this stuff in New York, and we were actually in Grand Central Station when she rang me with this news, basically to tell me that this huge like fuck up had happened. And instead of ringing me being like, oh God, this has just arrived, I just looked at it like, what am I going to do? She had done a spreadsheet and gone through every single t-shirt, listing each fault and whether like ranking, I can't remember exactly what it was, but then, and then basically what she was going to go back to them with, and what does she want me to like authorize to move forward. So she just gave me options and the solution. She told me the problem, and it was like, she'd only been working here, like 3 weeks or something. Yeah. It was pretty amazing.
Yeah. And that's such a, I think, that confidence is such a powerful thing to have in a small team, and like knowing where your strengths are. But on the flip side of that, it's as important to say, I'm really out of my depth here. And being that honesty of being like, oh, actually, this isn't, and either being like, how do we fix that? Either you bring an expert in, or I need more time. With the software. That's just stuff that I was like, I know I've got the confidence to know that I can learn it, but I can't do it by myself right now. That's so important with a small team. Again, like the inefficiencies that would come out of like not having that confidence there. I'm really sorry, I can't do this, would just be, it makes me feel
there's a really good, that I know how other people I've worked with would deal with that situation. So when so Isabel started, our like the capital that we had with the brand was not a lot. Like I really didn't even know whether I could afford you. But I knew the long term benefits obviously was you were an investment. But so other places I'd worked, if this situation had happened and you were like even with Crow, our accountants are, they're
pricey.
They're worth their price, but they are more expensive than other quotes that we had by a long shot. Yeah. And there's just that element, isn't there, where it's like, yes, I could pay you to have gone off, got quotes from other accountants, forgot their names, and then, done X, Y, and Z, or gone on these training courses, or do this. And it's like, by the time I've paid you to do that, give me that information, book it in, or paid you the time to do an online course, because the online course is cheaper than what he offered to basically train you. And then I was going to pay you to do the training. It was really, that's in my head, it was like that. We just don't have time for that.
Yeah. It's those like weighing up those. And that's where I think when you're really transparent and really honest, actually, sometimes those conversations might be a bit trickier, but the solution comes to you much faster. And I think if you kind of bringing it back to reducing that risk of burnout, if you basically kick the can down the road, you always use that term, and I think it's a bit jargony, but it really does explain the situation well. If you're like constantly kicking that can down the road to, save pennies over like those efficiencies, it's just not worth it. But being able to have those transparent conversations and know your strengths, but also know where your strengths aren't, making those decisions quicker, ultimately will reduce additional work, which will then lead to that kind of burnout, but feelings of burnout or feeling uncomfortable in your role or whatever.
And people people not feeling that they're able to do their job, or that they, like you say, when there's nowhere to hide in a team, somebody's not confident in what they're doing, or mistakes will make, people will procrastinate. And as we've learned with having to sort of us as a team work a lot more efficiently and more organised, ultimately the financial benefits for us by doing that is so much. And it's all a juggling act. And that's why I think sometimes as well, if it's like you're hiring more people to help out with X, Y, and Z, if it then creates more work, I know we talk about this, but fulfillment, I'm fucking boring, are they? Sorry. They're fulfillment centres.
Being able to talk to your team like that is really important.
We always talk about the fulfillment centres being a good example. Is that it depends obviously. Because of our price point, we're not sending out thousands of jumpers every day. In which case, maybe we would have to. But ultimately, I still think in that situation, I would have my own team.
Fulfillment team, yeah. You're just shifting workload from somebody packing a jumper to somebody managing another company packing a jumper.
Yeah, but those people will be paid less than how we would probably pay our team, with less care, less attention to detail. We wouldn't have control of our stock. Things would go missing. All of that. I would just prefer to actually pay somebody to do the job well here and be part of the team. And it makes it sound like it's almost a sort of financially quite an indulgent way to do it. But I just think to eliminate mistakes being made, customer service, the customers coming back to us, our returning customer rate is so high. Because of all of those things.
Yeah.
So it's, and then when you think about that returning customer rate, we're not paying to acquire, Abby is still yawning, we're not paying to acquire, retaining those customers. This is, it saves us money in itself.
Yeah.
Apart from everything else, having that retention of loyal customers because of the service we give them saved us money. So all of those things, it might feel like I'm sort of saying, let's just pay out for it. You consider all of that. You consider so many of the efficiencies in those decisions, and I mean, it's worked so far. I mean, I know that there's been a couple of hiccups along the way with some hires and relationships that we've taken on either directly in the team or hiring, outsourcing something. We have made a few decisions that haven't paid off. There's a really good example of us, especially like things like sort of cutting corners in time, where I don't know where you were, but so for example on Monday, Isabel and I went to have a meeting with the Hoxton when we're having our launch, which we get the train in. The trains aren't cheap from Cirencester to London, but it means we can work on the train. Don't have to try and find somewhere to park and all of that stuff. And at the time it was like, this could be a meeting that we have over FaceTime, but actually I'm the only one that's seen the space. It was really important to me that somebody else on the team viewed the space, because I knew I would probably forget things. But also we got to meet one of the people that would be managing the event on the day, there was a lot of little questions that probably they wouldn't have answered over FaceTime.
Yeah.
Like when we could turn up.
Yeah.
If somebody else was running. Like all of these little things. So it actually ended up being a really useful use of our time and the cost of the train tickets. But where I've made that mistake was not meeting somebody I hired in a contract. And I had lots of FaceTime meetings, had a sense of how we would work well, whether we would work well together or not. Didn't take the time to go and meet them and, pay for that train ticket. And when I met them, contract was already signed. And I knew it within that first sort of couple of minutes that this wasn't going to be a long-standing relationship, working relationship. And it was picking up on, there was a lot of elements as to why it wasn't going to work, but I should have just met them before hiring them, and I didn't.
We've come where Slow Love has grown really quickly we're only 3 years old, and that growth has been really quick. Knowing that there have definitely been times where it's felt like we are at a limit, the team are really saturated, and knowing when to stop, take stock, think about what you need to fill, think about what the best things are to take away from the team members that are currently working from you. And then be able to either hire somebody in or outsource those bits of work to allow the team to go back to its best efficiency to be able to then continue on with that growth. That's such a skill, I think, from as a business owner or in managerial position, is knowing when to make those decisions. And actually, I think of a good last year, we're doing our first launch party this year, and we were going to do it last year, and we had got a good headway into planning it.
We were going to have party bags, which were not for this launch, by the way. Sorry, guys.
Sorry.
We're doing something kind of as cool, but I've gone ahead and we'd had these key rings made. Yeah, and we had
that's
how far into it we were.
You and Shara had spent a whole day looking at venues in London, and we had looked at doing the invites, and we had already started reaching out to press. And I think it felt every element of it felt so stressful and so forced and so not right. And it was really bending everybody out of shape, wasn't it?
Yeah. Actually, it just didn't feel very us.
No, it felt, that was the point. I remember you looking around these venues and coming, you were like, Holly was actually I could feel the heat from her body of on the phone to me on the way back from London, she was so cross. Because everything was just not right and really ill thought out.
Yeah, it wasn't
prepared.
Wasn't prepared. It wasn't prepared. It wasn't in keeping with our theme. It just very much felt like a bit of a money spinner for the wrong reasons, and the ultimate cost of that was literally what we would have spent for this launch party and our content trip, and it was probably the cost of the studio that we do you know what I mean? It was in total. And I remember there were elements and also just the message that was sending wasn't for our lovely community. It was to basically
it was also paying people to come and turn up to look, and it was just, and you had that confidence at that point to be I know I've ultimately spent money on this, but I'm putting this I'm axing this now, but we're not going any further with it. And had we not done that, we were literally opening the team and the brand up to an element of burnout and it just being so wrong on every level. So that was such a perfect example of knowing when to just stop, take a step back, realise what's gone wrong, and then correct those with either hiring a new team member, getting rid of a relationship that wasn't working, or understanding actually what we wanted to. And I think for us, it was why are we doing this? Why are we trying to do this big press event? We need to do something with our community. They're the best that's the best thing for us to do.
We don't want to have to force people to come by booking them in.
Yeah.
As in, I mean, technically that is what we're doing now, because you have to book a ticket, but that's more for us to like manage the numbers, because we've got limited availability. I know
those people are coming.
I know those people are going to come. We're not sort of trying to ensure that this person who says they're going to come is going to turn up by like trapping them with money, basically.
Yeah.
So it does. I think that could have been a really big costly mistake on a lot of different levels.
Yeah.
And that was trusting your gut.
And I think that goes back to like that, having really honest conversations with yourself and being like, let's not just do this for the sake of it, or let's not just roll with this because it feels like the right time to do this kind of events. It's just not going to work. No. So let's just stop. And then not rushing the process to like rectify that situation. So not being like, right, we need to hire somebody in the next 2 weeks, and it's making that same mistake again. Just not rushing the process of what do we need to do. And you're really good at being like, let's not like all talk about it at once. I just need to go back, have a think, and then relay the plan.
Yeah.
And we'll go from there. And like bringing the right people in to assist your decision making, rather than it being like an open forum and just lots of noise and stuff getting.
I do find that quite hard.
Yeah.
Sometimes I just need to go away and
stay at home.
Let it marinate.
Yeah. Holly will be like, I won't be until like 11 today, and that's like we know that's like marinating time.
Yeah. Big old marinade. Honestly, I think it was the bank holiday. When was it that we had the 4 days? I can't remember.
Yeah.
When was it where I basically...
And I was like, let's all come in to work. And you were like, no, let's not.
Yeah, no, thank you. I was looking... mentally, I have completely blocked 4 days out. But that was also when I think I'd said about TikTok to you. And I was like, when I come in, you and I need to have a quick meeting to talk. And Abby was like, oh, that sounds really serious. And I was like, no. I think it's a good thing, but it's just an idea that I want to pitch to you, because I've had a day off and it's all I can think about. And it's a trick that we're missing. And I think we need to start looking at it. And that was when we were like, I think we need to hire someone to basically just manage this, because Abby now does so much, and the podcast, which is people are still listening to. Thank you very much. So she needs to dedicate time to it, and you're dedicating time to it.
Yeah.
So we needed to sort of hand off quite an important piece that we're kind of missing out on. Not for long though.
Yeah. But that process was really good, and you, again, like bringing Abby into the interviewing of the, to fill that role was just such an important, it could have been, you didn't do it on your own. You were like, I need this person to be, even though I'm going to be paying this person as part of my business, I need that person to work well with Abby. Therefore, it's really important that she's part of that interviewing process. Not everybody would do that. But that's kind of like the key elements of those being in that small business environment is, there's no like, I think it kind of goes back to again, I'm sorry, Cleve, if you are listening to this, I don't want to bash you, but I'm going to use the same analogy of that kind of like old age approach to like puffy chest, like this is my business and I'm going to be making really decisions because I'm the boss. It's like, actually, we're a team and I need my team to work well, and that works by getting them involved in relevant decision making.
Yeah, 100%
to their role.
And that is the thing. I think it's really important. I really value everyone's. I mean, ultimately, I know that the buck ends. With me.
Of course it does.
But it's with the horrible stuff as well.
Yeah.
I would never say, "Can you deal with this conversation?" Because I can't, I don't fancy it. It might be the case you might need to be there if I've not been part of it, but ultimately the harsh stuff has to come out of my mouth. But I do think it's really important that everybody's involved.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're going to, that's just when more mistakes happen.
Yeah. I also think that allowing your team to have an element of involvement also gives such a nice intrinsic job satisfaction when you feel like
100%
you are part of building a brand. It's not just we are working with you, not for you. And I think that is obviously we are working for you. Holly pays all of our wages. It's very much black and white. It is that element. But I don't ever feel like I'm like, oh God, I'm never scared to come to work. I never get any Sunday scaries. There's that. I have very much worked in environments where I'm like, God, I just don't want to go to work tomorrow. I'm like, I don't feel like I can be myself with that person because they're like, there is that element of like, I'm fucking boss. I'm the boss man and these are my decisions.
Oh, but
it just doesn't work like that.
No, I mean, there's obviously situations where it probably does in some ways. I think there is in certain areas, but ultimately it is like being a parent, isn't it? It's like you need me. I feel that you guys need me to be consistent.
Yeah.
Not throw my toys out the pram for something which ultimately is probably my fault, or at least it comes down to me. Like you say, everyone makes mistakes. If you guys made the same mistake again and again, that would be a conversation that we'd have to have. But it's not me. I don't need my ego stroked.
Yeah.
I
love your hair today.
Yeah. God, you look great.
She knows already.
The way that the brand is performing in itself is that.
Yeah.
And I think and everybody plays such a huge part in it. Of that, it's not just me, but I do think I guess my worry is I guess what you're talking about is how do you know when to take things away from everybody's plate. So that's not like, so a really sort of transparent conversation is that Isabella now does the podcast. That takes, a good sort of half a day and content away from what your job traditionally, I mean, your job doesn't really have.
No, has no bounds.
Yeah. But that is technically time that's being taken away from you. So that all of that is quite a hard one to manage. And also then we've talked about this before, but it's when you bring someone new in.
Yeah.
There has to be an element of a sort of organic fit.
Yeah.
And not just as in they like a dick joke. Is that it's the personality and, like you say, having the confidence, being proactive, not being lazy.
Yeah.
Having the same mindset, being able to jump in and be adaptable to changes because we're not a corporation.
Yeah.
So all of that stuff, that person has to have that fit. So it's all, I'm always like, oh, when are we going to what should we do? Is there going to need to be a bit of a sort of workaround? Is there a bit of a shit? You help out with production as well, which is something, I never would have thought you would have been doing in your job role.
Yeah.
When you first started, but now it's kind of developed that way.
Organically happened, which I absolutely love, by the way. That plays into my creative
and
side.
I do think that has been lucky because you are so naturally creative. So it's been a really nice part of your job responsibility. But I also taking you on, that wasn't something that I thought about in an obvious way. It was more like, sure, grab the ball by the horns, and that's what I need.
Yeah. I love grabbing balls by the horns.
I love it.
Yeah, I do.
Big old horn grabber.
Love grabbing those horns. HMRC horns, especially.
Yeah. So I guess that's what's next on your question. I feel like I'm going to start waffling.
That's okay. I think that the one thing we haven't kind of really deep dived into is the flexibility that you've got with the team. I know we've kind of on, you said like, oh, if one of your children are poorly, it's like, we'll just go home, and like, I don't want you to sit at your desk mithering about what's happening, or if you're X, Y, and Z, just go home and sort out with children. Holly's been there and done that with young kids, and she knows the juggle of that is really hard. But doesn't just come down to children. It's anything like
summer holiday. So, for example, like when Artie, Isabel's little boy, started school, I didn't want to be like, it makes it really hard because your actual day shrinks and it's rigid, and you can't, there's a lot of other stuff that goes on in between. And then the summer holidays in itself becomes another juggle, and the kids expect you to be their sort of primary school teacher, so entertaining you because they've been so used to all of that stuff. And you were like, yeah, I'll be fine. And then you were like,
that's okay, I'll just work around the kids. And Holly was like, oh, bless you. But you didn't say that. You were like, I'm just going to wait until what I've just told you is going to happen is going to inevitably happen, and then you'll be grateful for the flexibility that I give you as a team.
But it's hard. The summer holidays, I think, last year was really tricky because we hadn't implemented our critical path.
Yeah.
So where you were having to alternate bits and pieces, childcare, Grace was alternating school clubs and childcare. Where all of that was going wrong was like decision making was taking much longer. So deadlines were being missed, but we didn't realise that's what was happening. So at least this year we need to just have a bit more. This is going to literally turn Shah on so much, but we need to probably have like a summer holiday project. Like somebody keeping track of decisions being made so that we just don't fall behind the way
somewhere Shah's like, oh god. She can like feel the decision that's just been made by
the idea of creating a new project. Had other people's like rotas and decision making, and that she will be the one policing that decision.
Yeah, she's gonna love it.
Yeah.
Project manager Shah. The voice goes up an octave.
When Shah was doing her first project and you got involved, Abby and I were pissing ourselves because the volume of your voices was like
Battle of the Voice.
Yeah, it was insane. But
Shah actually do work really well together. Just a caveat.
It was just funny. The flexibility. So that way, it obviously. What is the point of me saying you need to make sure that you stay in 9 till 5 during the summer holidays, because it's just not going to happen, is it? Yeah. You'll be miserable. You'll try and keep those times, which will annoy me because I'm like, we all know you're going to be late. So it's just so much easier to be like, this is how it will be. It is going to be messy, but we just need to make sure that like the jobs are being ticked off. Yeah. How that happens and where it happens really doesn't matter. And I do think that's you just have to be really realistic.
Yeah.
And it does then create it just means we have to just be a bit more organised, I think, before summer holes kick off. And it's like Oscar's doing work experience. And we only have one car, and he definitely won't have passed his driving test by then. So it means Charlie will be driving him, which will take like an hour and a half of Charlie's day each day. I can't do it, but we only have one car. All of these, like, so there's just little things. That means Aurora's on her own, and I don't really want. She's old. She obviously can cook herself some pasta and pesto, but I don't want her to be on her own every day. Yeah, I know she won't be every day, but there's just little things like that, and I think we just have to be upfront about it. Abbo's going on 1 million holidays, so she's not going to be around.
Absolute joker.
No, so selfish. But I think that's where it's just being mindful, isn't it?
Yeah.
And realistic. You just have to be realistic.
Yeah. Planning, open, honest.
We all everybody books in the holidays now.
Yeah, actually that's a really subtle thing that's happened at the beginning of the year.
Yeah. Which you were good at telling me, but unless I have something I can just look at and know, I would be asking you 10,000 times a day, which must have been annoying. When are you going to do again? What are your days? What days are you doing with the kids?
Yeah.
So I think it's just planning, isn't it?
Yeah.
Being realistic to avoid that sort of burnout. I was just saying to Abby before we started filming this that I only have one holiday booked, which is at the end of August, But really, I can probably, even if I just take...
You should really have more than that, shouldn't you?
But I think probably what I'll do is just take off like a week over a weekend.
Yeah.
So I'm back in the office. And Christmas, I think, was the best example of burnouts.
Yeah.
You and I, everybody was in, it was like balls deep in chaos. Good chaos.
Yeah, fun chaos.
Fun, good, busy chaos. But it got to the point where we were like saying yes to stuff because opportunities were coming our way. And you want to be at the forefront of like your customer's mind, especially on the run up to Christmas. And we wanted to do something for our community, have this sort of sale party downstairs where we did like the fizz and the mince pies, and we had our knitwear available to buy, which obviously, you know, as we don't ever, those aren't like money makers for us. That's not why we do it. We would probably sell over a weekend what we would do anyway online. It's more just sort of, it's nice to meet people, but because we had done so many different things. Abby moved house. Do you remember?
Oh my God, yeah.
We did a sample sale. Everyone was poorly.
Yeah.
You and I had been to Belfast and done all this stuff. We had Black Friday, which was much more efficiently run because Charles was working here this year. But all of this stuff, and then that party, we basically all were hanging on.
Holly drank an entire bottle of cough mixture during that day, because it was just like everyone was hanging on by a thread.
We were all really poorly, and it was full on. That was worse. When we finished that afternoon, and I had drunk all that cough medicine to sort of just like not even thinking about it, just because I could feel like my throat was really raspy and I was talking to people the whole time. And we came up here and it was a shit tip, and it was like, everyone drop what you're doing, we are fucking going home.
Yeah.
Don't try and tidy up. Everyone's eyes were like bloodshot. I said this before, but when we got home, straight after that, walked home, I sat on the sofa. Charlie had put like his coat on the thing and then had done like a shopping list and said, right, we need to nip to the shop. I'd have fallen asleep in that like 5 minutes. And he just went off and left me. I was dead to the world. We were meant to be going out for dinner with Jess and Hugh or going to their house. And he'd messaged them in that time being like, Holly is not okay. Like, you have to cancel. I was just absolutely gone.
I think that, though, is also a really good example of just what it's like working in a small team. Everyone was like, and not at one point, Holly was like, does the team want to do this? Do you have it in you? It's yes or no. It's not like we have to do this. And everyone was so up for it because it was just, because we are all so involved. Everybody's so invested in those things. So it was very much a team decision to do all of those. But yeah, we did really push ourselves to the limits. But that's what then opens up, you know, areas then grin through as to like, right, what do we need to do to make that run better next year, or to reduce the amount of, and we've got a couple of,
that was our best month ever by a long, long way.
Yeah, which was obviously came from us saying yes to all those things. But now we've got Tia, who used to pack for us. She's actually coming to help us for the launch. Evie, who did the work experience with us. Even Chloe, who did that week experience with us. We could ask her. We're kind of building a small team. Actually, when we did the podcast with Alice from World Secrets, she was explaining that all of the kind of extracurricular things outside of like your day-to-day running. So obviously the shows for World Secrets aren't extracurricular. It's such a massive part of their business, but she has like small teams outside of her day-to-day, and like I feel like Slow Love are kind of building that to make those things maybe run
just as help, like just help additional. I mean, Tia obviously is, you show her something once and she just knows how to do it, so she'll be in charge of taking the money at launch party because she's very trustworthy. But as in trustworthy, I mean, I don't mean she's going to steal our money. I mean, like, you can trust that she's not going to make a mistake. Yeah. Whereas even I would make mistakes, so I'm not trustworthy at doing that.
Yeah.
But it's, so that was, I guess Christmas was probably, it's a really hard one because I never changed it.
Yeah, 100%. And that was my point I was trying to make. It was like everybody was like so up for it.
Yeah.
We just ran ourselves into the ground because we just pushed ourselves to the limits. But then at the same time, that's also really exciting. Like, oh, fuck it, what's one more thing?
Yeah. With the event at R&R.
Yeah.
We did that was so busy, unexpectedly busy for us.
Yeah, that was fun.
And that was fun. I was no help at that. I mean,
once again, Shah did a great job.
Yeah.
Oh, Shah's going to love listening to this one. Yeah. We've talked about her orgasming over a project.
Sure, like first thing on next week's agenda is I listened to your pod and you mentioned a project.
Yeah.
And managing you all over the summer holidays.
Yeah.
So
it's already done. She's already done it. I don't know why is that her coming in now? She can hear us. She's like, I can fucking hear you. Anyway, would you rather go back to an old job that you'd worked in, being managed by somebody else? Lol. We'll ask Charlie how well that would go. Being managed by somebody else, but you get paid double or triple what you're like being paid, what you're paying yourself now, or carry on. So basically earn boatloads of money doing something you hate, or
I wouldn't change this for the world. If I mean, obviously I need to feed my
me
kids.
and Abby.
I need to feed my kids.
Yeah.
So one of us would have to be making some money, but even if I'm always, even in our like stressiest times, I'm like, I still wouldn't change it.
Yeah.
And nothing actually feels truly stress. There's obviously elements which there's degrees of stressfulness, but it's not the same stress as being like trapped in a sort of being managed by someone who doesn't know what the fuck they're doing.
Yeah,
and just
literally hating your day-to-day life.
Yeah,
of going to work.
Boring people who also hate their jobs being there and that atmosphere.
Yeah,
awful management, no leadership. It's fine. How much time have you got?
On that note,
Goodbye.
Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you for listening.